Nobody watches a Bigfoot documentary thinking they're going to find Bigfoot. They just don't. Even if you fall into the camp of Bigfoot being real, you know if someone found any solid evidence, they wouldn't be breaking the news on a random episode of Mountain Monsters.
Look here, Trapper. Something's been eating on that pumpkin.
For sure. Damn.
Bigfoot pumpkin pie.
And if you want to know where I stand, I think Bigfoot could exist, I just think it's very unlikely. But I do enjoy watching people on night vision cameras hunting monsters, and that's exactly what you're gonna get when you dive into some Squatch hunting. The real entertainment doesn't come from the possibility of finding an ape man, it's about the presentation. Are you gonna get some fun characters? Some interviews detailing first-hand accounts of encountering the bee-man himself? Maybe we'll get to see some cool terrain, or someone will twist their ankle. Some spooky music will play as you see the trees shake and wonder, hey, is that a giant monkey dude? Point is, you can make something very entertaining out of very little.
This is a very squatchy place.
I think this is true of the film I'm talking about today, but not in the way they intended. This is the worst Bigfoot documentary I've ever seen, and it's called Bigfoot Girl. Ignore the cover that makes this look like a very steamy romance. I don't know. No one would blame you if you thought this doc was about a very specific fetish, but it's actually more mundane and sad than that. Like much of this film, it's all a big lie. The fact is, you aren't going to be seeing this sexy lady or Bigfoot in this movie. The actual Bigfoot girl is this person.
Hi, my name is Kiana, and I am Bigfoot Girl.
I just about died at this intro. Never have I seen someone so confident that they nailed it. So much so that she does it again to close out the movie. It's like she's LARPing for the first time. Hell yeah, girl, I remember playing dress up and pretending my hoodie made me some kind of mythical woodland bard. This introduction lets us know right off the bat what kind of movie this is. Something that thinks it's very cool and is not in every way possible. But who is Bigfoot Girl? Well, she's Kiana Passmore, and this is kinda, sorta her story? They pitch this as a journey of closure. As a child, Kiana and her father once spotted the mythical Bigfoot, and now she's going back to that same place in British Columbia in an attempt to recreate the experience. I tried looking up some stuff about her, and while I have very little, it's worth noting that she's an actress who, 2 years prior, starred as Kiara in the horror film Bigfoot Country, directed by, oh look at that, Jason Mills, director of Bigfoot Girl. I'm not gonna say that this places doubt on Kiana's credibility or the authenticity of this documentary, but this is just not passing my smell test. And Bigfoot probably stinks something fierce, and I should know, they're very clear on things vis-a-vis Bigfoot odor.
It has that smell like a person you see on the street that lives there. Bad human odor, but 10 or 20 times worse.
Here's the main thing you need to know about Bigfoot Girl and why this documentary is so remarkably bad. Everything about her is a lie. Every single thing. And I don't need IMDb to tell me that, I just needed to watch this movie, because it becomes very clear very quickly that she was not part of this documentary when they initially filmed it. Case in point, Bigfoot Girl just fucks off out of her own movie for much of this, and that is because her stuff was filmed and inserted later. Oh, but they pretend she's there. See, a smart person might make her a host of some kind, a wraparound segment for this investigation, but the documentary Bigfoot Girl doesn't think much of your intelligence. Kiana keeps talking about events as if she's there via voiceover, but she's always conveniently somewhere else. The others are going to the campsite? Oh, fiddlesticks. Kiana and her group got lost. Oh, but don't worry. Via Blair Witch camera, she tells us that she met up with them later. But lordy, do we never see her there. Outside of Hat Man, she never interacts with a single person involved in the documentary. Not their guide, not the paranormal investigators. She is never in the same place at the same time. She's not even there for the actual search, which is like the entire premise of the documentary. The whole thing is laughably pathetic. What do you even have in Bigfoot Girl if there's no Bigfoot Girl? Just a bunch of losers walking around in the woods aimlessly? I realize Sasquatch docs require very little, but this is literally the only hook they had going for them. So just forget Bigfoot Girl for the moment, because she is utterly irrelevant to this Bigfoot Girl review.
James and his crew were headed down the mountain. We had quite the trek to catch up.
We actually got lost for quite a while, but we actually caught up with James and the rest of the crew, which was good.
We sat around the fire, waiting for the sun to set, to begin our quest through the night.
Our crew and I are here at the Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal, and we are super excited to get on board get over to Campbell River and go see Bigfoot.
I bet you're wondering right about now just what is the content of Bigfoot Girl, and oh, how I wish I could tell you. It's nothing. It's a nothing movie. It's literally less than nothing, because Bigfoot fans will tell you Bigfoot documentaries are nothing, but none are as nothing as this. It's a bunch of half-baked segments pasted together in what I can only charitably call a film, and even then they barely made it to a little over an hour. So here's what goes down. After Bigfoot Girl tells us her story, she goes to interview James Tyson, who runs a podcast about the supernatural. I'm not convinced that he's really all that into Bigfoot, but he sure does love to name drop famous grifters, supernatural experiencers that he's talked to. He proceeds to ramble for so long that I left, watched the Hobbit trilogy, and came back and he was still talking. There are no cutaways. The audio is garbage. Kiana spends most of it nodding with only a half understanding. Nothing is considered too useless to be included here. Halfway through, he just starts talking about ghosts.
At a Bigfoot conference, International Bigfoot Conference down there, Sasquatch, the big hairy critter. I have a podcast with a number of the psychics that were on that TV series, Psychic Detective and Psychic Investigator. Strange ET contacts were coming through, and they were talking about Bigfoot. Lyle Blackburn, connected to the Boggy Creek monster. Ever since I was a little kid, I've seen dead people, which can be awkward. I got an opportunity to go see a psychic who I never had any belief in. You know, that's a bit of a fluke. Then she told me that I was something called an empath and I could read cards for people, and I just, okay, whatever. Disembodied people. I got asked to do an internet radio show in 2014, and from that I developed another podcast. Is it moving through like a ghost, or is it knocking down trees? I've got my little bag of stuff.
I just can't wait to see what happens, and if we're able to find Bigfoot, if we're able to get some prints like you said, or even just anything with them being in the presence of Bigfoot.
This is the first thing that happens, and where most people will turn this off. But not me. I powered on. I don't know why this guy is here, to be honest. I think he was the original host of this documentary before the reshoots. His only qualification for being in this is having talked to Robert Gimlin of the infamous Patterson-Gimlin film, and he gets his name wrong.
And I've had the opportunity to talk to people like Tom Gimlin of the Patterson-Gimlin film.
The only bit of editing in this ungodly long segment is that jump cut before the name, meaning they cut something out, but not that. This is a Bigfoot documentary. The audience for this is Bigfoot fans. You ain't converting anyone watching this. This is junk meant to be consumed by people who watch the same blurry-ass footage of people running in the woods going, "What is that?" they've seen a million times over. And you cannot even get the name right of one of the people involved in the most famous Bigfoot footage ever filmed. This is Bigfoot 101, people!
Patterson's doing the 8mm photos of it, and Thomas is wondering what the heck's going on.
I have to believe that they didn't even know this was wrong. And this happens 4 minutes in. Immediately, we are told that they do not give a shit about Bigfoot in this Bigfoot documentary. Enjoy the next hour. I cannot fathom the sheer audacity. Why does Kiana seem to not understand what he's talking about until he explains what the Patterson-Gimlin film is? She's Bigfoot Girl, and after 6 minutes of bullshit talking to Podcast Man in the woods, it dips into another talking head segment with Podcast Man.
What is Bigfoot?
Get to the point! I want to go back to Bigfoot Girl though, because I cannot get over this. She asks Tyson about his experiences and how that relates to Bigfoot, and he tells her so much about his childhood, his career, his ghostly encounters, how despite being a skeptic, he wants to figure these things out, unlike these guys who were just having fun in the woods. And she says nothing. Nothing about her quest for knowledge, her childhood experience, nothing about her personal stakes, because let's face it, they aren't real. The documentary is called Bigfoot Girl, and she's so unimportant they don't even bother to mic her. More like Big Lie Girl.
Is it an alien shapeshifter?
Absolutely not. But what about the first-hand accounts in this documentary? The experiencers, as they call them, who may in fact believe what they're talking about. In our cast of characters here, only 4 people claim to have had any sort of experience, and that's Bigfoot Girl, their guide, and this couple in front of these blinds. I absolutely love this segment here. Okay, so every Sasquatch story is kind of the same. Someone's in the woods and hears a noise, and there he is before he shuffles off to go eat some berries or something. Well, this may be the most boring Bigfoot story I've ever heard, and for some reason, they decide to do a reenactment of this. Like everything here, they include every little minor detail you never needed to know, but here is the actual Sasquatch part from start to finish. These two see something that may have been Bigfoot by a tree. They're not sure. They go, "Hey, what is that?" And then they leave. I mean, they did a casting call for 2 actors to play these people when they were younger, took them to the woods, and had them point for a while? Why did they bother? I know this is a visual medium, but I could have imagined that all by myself. The best detail is that apparently they've kept this a secret for like a decade. Like, this was too boring for them to even tell their friends.
There were some snowmobilers. We were gonna turn around, we ran into these snowmobilers where there was lots of snow. We realized there was too much snow to get up there. So we weren't really dressed for winter, because at the time we didn't realize there was a bunch of snow up there. We were not dressed for winter, and we had to walk back. It was about a half a mile to the car. So we started walking down back to the truck, and she says, "Well, I wonder, what's that?" She points out. She goes, "What's that?" And I turned around and she pointed. She's pointing to this thing. So she's pointing this thing, and I'm looking across, I'm going, "What is that?" And she's still pointing at it, and she goes, "What is that?" Like, "What is that?" And we're looking and looking. She's going, "What is that? What is that?" We don't know what it is. And we're staring at it. We must have looked at it for at least a minute. Like, we were staring.
This is the only story they decide to reenact, and it's easily the worst of the 3. The one the guide tells is buck wild, y'all. This guide, guys, oh my god, I adore him. He is my favorite part of this. So they hired this native dude, you know, to give us his close to nature wisdom, if you will. I'm not saying this to be stereotypical, that's just why they put him in this documentary. And he is easily the least wise or convincing native guide they could have put in here. He is Tom Sewid, a Bigfoot believer, someone who respects the beast and his domain. They even go so far as to call him a Bigfoot expert. Like, he knows all about their diet and whereabouts and hobbies, I guess because he asked them.
I honestly think they need 6,000 calories a day or more, equivalent to what a grizzly bear needs.
He tells us about what one might encounter in this rough and tumble terrain, the local plants, particularly fruit, and what Bigfoot means to his people. Then he goes straight from that into this.
Quit gifting to those creatures. Make sure you have a face mask on. Make sure you've sanitized yourself, because God forbid we don't want to give them our filthy, rotten diseases and see that race exterminated.
Holy shit, dude, maybe find Bigfoot first! We don't even have any solid evidence that Sasquatch really exists, and he's already moved on to a Bigfoot holocaust. He is on a whole other plane of thought than the rest of the world. I mean, look, yes, don't spread your diseases to Bigfoot, but I mean, was this ever a pressing concern to anyone in existence? I feel like we just landed in Bigfoot country, and already he's writing out the Constitution of Bigfoot rights. Oh man, ahead of his time. Are Bigfoots considered Canadian citizens? Can they play middle school basketball? Don't even get me started on Bigfoot discrimination. I think my favorite part is that he's telling us to quit gifting these creatures, as if he knows for certain the Bigfoot are already dying from our filthy human diseases. This is actually a very important issue. I mean, now more than ever, we should be thinking of social distancing from Bigfoot. Anyway, right after telling us to keep our germs away from the sacred ape man, he tells us a story about trying to blast those fucking Bigfoot into oblivion.
We're moving driftwood from the beach. I'm all hot and sweaty, and I said to one of the boys, "Grab me a pop." And I grabbed the pop and I started taking a drink. Just heard trees shaking, and all of a sudden this big boulder comes, and I'm like, "Hey guys, where's my gun?" It's 2 of them now. She's trying to get to the dinghy, and I'm like, "Where's my gun?" And out in the boat. I'm like, "Well, give me an axe or a machete." My sister's running in, and she's like, "What's that? What are they?" I said, "They're Sasquatches. Don't worry about it." So showing those big fellas that, hey, this is my kayak camp. Put one in the tube and lifted it up in the air, and boom! The day after, I went in with a bunch of buddies and a bunch of shotguns and rifles, and we lit her up. A couple hundred shots were fired.
What? The only gift you should be giving the Bigfoot is a lead bullet in its back. If that doesn't work, just give him the old hatchet to the face. This story has everything. Soda pop, An Indiana Jones Boulder, attempted Bigfoot assassination and chase scene. Or big fellas, as he calls them. Why did we get a reenactment of the Venetian blind couple wandering aimlessly in the woods when we could have gotten this guy shooting a shotgun wildly at an entire big fella family? He's not even all that worried about it, he just apparently really wants to kill him a Sasquatch. And the next day, he and his friends go back and just shoot at the air? Why? Does he think Sasquatch was just standing in the same place? I have no idea at all where this guy stands now. Is he for protecting Bigfoot or filling it full of holes? Why did we need to know the detail about him drinking a pop? Why did Jason Mills not feel the need to cut that? I mean, I guess to be fair, if I was editing this, I would have cut the entire movie. Every single segment is too long! Stories ramble on for a decade with pointless details and sidebars until maybe they get to what they were trying to say about Sasquatch, which isn't much. I felt my mind slowly drift into insanity as person after person yammered on about meaningless things they saw on the drive or what they were eating or drinking that day. It's not even interesting details, it's like they're all just telling you their stream of consciousness thoughts as they write in their diaries. Once the crew of everyone who was actually in this documentary, and then Bigfoot Girl's separate crew arrives, and that is halfway through the film, mind you, what actually happens? Well, Podcast Hat Man's psychic friends told him to bring cherries to lure out Bigfoot, and when psychics tell you to bring cherries, you listen. This is only touched on again in the wrap-up, I'll spoil it. The cherries were untouched. The next day, they tell us they heard some stuff in the middle of the night that was probably Bigfoot, but did they record any of it? No. What are you doing, guys? That's all you're here for, is to film stuff, and you didn't get any of that? I guess you just have to take their word for it.
We heard a whoop that came over there, and we just stopped. We looked at each other, and we're like, did you hear that?
There's owls around too.
Oh, but wait, this is exciting. They find a bit of dirt that's kind of misshapen and tell us it's a Bigfoot print.
The toe, like a big toe mark here.
Oh, is that what that is? You sure, bud? They make a cast of it for further study, show us a bunch of dirt and pine needles stuck in plaster, and then later we find out the obvious, that the print didn't give them jack shit, because it was just a blob of pine needles.
My disappointment was overshadowed by the footprint we found.
Truly staggering evidence. Not that it was unimportant, because Podcaster Guy goes back to Bigfoot Girl, well rested from her hotel room far away from the Sasquatch nonsense in a different year, and tells her all about the nothing that happened, that she was supposedly there for. We didn't actually need to hear him tell her everything we just saw in the world's most newsworthy recap, but we're gonna get it. She looks disinterested, which is weird because I thought her experience connected to her childhood and her father and... Okay, I couldn't finish that. We all know that backstory was made up.
There was one gorgeous track, then forgot about it and walked right through it. And the second one, in hindsight, looking back at it, I'm thinking I actually probably missed a chunk at the top end of it. It wasn't the type of ground you get an ideal footprint from.
The sense of purpose was fulfilled.
And that's it. That's literally it. The single day of people farting around in the woods while a girl in a hood pretends she is also there with them. I could not think of a single thing in this documentary that had a point, except of course that we shouldn't give Bigfoot's diseases, which is fair enough. Bigfoot Girl wasn't in it very much, the editing was next to non-existent, no one was pretending to be authentic in any way, and it was all hilariously pointless. Even with a half-assed hook, they don't have a story to tell, and that just leaves us with an hour of empty film. I will say that I laughed until I cried though, so in that regard, I can't say it wasn't a worthwhile endeavor. Much like the search for Bigfoot, sometimes you gotta sift through a lot of bullshit to get to those little nuggets of half-somethings and form your own conclusions. Me personally, I truly think this is the worst Bigfoot documentary I've ever seen. And I wholeheartedly recommend it. Does Bigfoot really exist? Who cares? But he'd probably find this doc pretty funny. Hand me a pop.
what is that?